So I'll be happy to take any questions or comments. $7:30. 7:30.
Okay, so we don't have much time. So if people could be very brief, and if you feel comfortable introducing yourself, do so, but you're under no obligation.
Thank you very much. Professor Andrews, we spoke earlier, but I have a bit of a problem with student protests. While they remain peaceful, that's fine. But as soon as they turn violent, I think this is basic thuggery. And I see lots of student protests, but not only students, so-called peaceful protests that suddenly becomes violent. Now I realize that in the Constitution is anybody's right to protest, but that's my one comment. The other comment I have is the so-called racial transformation at UCT. I think people should be appointed on the grounds of ability rather than race, creed, colour or sex. In my opinion, it's the only way to maintain a superior university. Thank you.
It's a comment, so yeah, it's just, there's not a question.
Brian?
Yeah.
Thanks. My name is Brian. It's interesting to speak after that. Usually after a comment like that, superior is followed by an adjective that usually refers to a color called white. White supremacist, maybe that's the kind of university you're referring to. I just want to make a comment here about the discussion today. It's unfortunate there's a group who I support in my own ways called Shakful TRC who had requested to be a discussant on at this talk. Part of it was in relation to the inflammatory title that I think was used for this talk. That was unfortunately denied without a response. I don't know what the reason for that is. I thought it was quite unusual given that the Dean herself has publicly written about wanting to engage in dialogue and so on. But that aside, I think it's interesting when professors come to address alumni to speak on behalf of students. There's parts of the presentation that speak about the professor's own interpretation of transformation in the law and so on. But we are in Cape Town, and many of the people who you are talking about are down the road. Their demands don't need to be translated to you. You're more than happy to engage with them and have that particular argument with them. So a recommendation to the alumni office would be that if you want to have a conversation with students and you happen to be in the same, about students, you happen to be in the same city, why don't you bring the alumni, the students, and the staff together and we have a debate? I think that makes some sense. On the question of the constitutional imperative, it's interesting because the law faculty was the first faculty to support the securitization of campus, to endorse and provide the foundational rationale for private security on the campus, which has spent millions and millions of your money on private security that initially were in violation of their own laws, in part by their own admission, by not having name tags, and also used for public order, where there was a session hosted in part by Right to Know and some of the members in this very house, who will tell you that there's no training manual for private security to be used for public order. Usually the monopoly of violence is held by the state, or in this case by the ruling class and their middle managers, in this case being UCT. The question I think for us to ask is that transformation is now, at one point, I think most people were critiquing it as a specific policy of the ANC, but now it is being adopted or invoked as some sort of universalism here as a defense against some insurgent thing that we spoke about. When you say that people are claiming for sovereignty, it's not like a light thing that you pass over in a slide. It's quite a heavy thing that requires further engagement, especially if the rest of the discussion is about the Constitution. Because if people are making the demand about sovereignty and self-determination, then they're actually in direct questioning of that foundational document that you're using to invoke. So when we're talking about this, there's a rationale that I hope that you see that I'm building here. If these are the proponents who provided us a rationale for violence, who are also telling you that this is the political ideology that they believe that they will use and enforce through violence. So when you ask the question of how do peaceful protests turn violent, maybe that's some of the things that you should start to think about, is that these are people who align themselves very closely with the state who seeks to repress what is continuous and ongoing riots that are happening all over the country. It just so happens to include the university at the moment.
We'll take three and then we'll...
Thank you. I'll be brief, believe me. Prof, what a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. It speaks to me from the law point of view. Partly my question has already been covered, especially when you spoke about the University of Cape Town having took upon the Afropolitan principle. More especially when you speak about, when you've just spoken about on your second last slide, the transformed law faculty. However, my question really is, of recently, we have just heard and we've seen that there has been an additional on the list of demands that people are making around the country around the total overhaul or the total review of the change, for that matter, of the curriculum at the institutions of higher learning. I know that you've actually just covered it on your second last slide. However, what is your take insofar as these demands of overhauling the curriculum at the institutions of higher learning to reflect the African norms, customs, pretty much way of life, not forgetting that we are actually a global, that is now when I say we are, I'm talking specifically about the University of Cape Town, being in the global village. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Penny, before, let me just clarify the nature of these events. These are events that the alumni department at the University of Cape Town hosts, and there's a particular format where we invite a speaker. We often also involved in suggesting what a topic should be, what we think are some of the relevant issues or pertinent issues of the day. And we never have discussants. It's not part of the format. But we are not close to it. And so if that's the kind of engagement that is being proposed from the part of the development department, we are quite happy to do it. It's not a decision that the dean took. It was part of the format of these events. So I just want to clarify that.
Just one, I've got only one question. You want to do another question? And then I've got my mic here.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. We'll do another round.
Okay. So the question that you raised is about the transformed faculty and sort of training, the whole transformed curriculum. Well, where I start with law, and I can only talk about law, where I start with law is who are we serving? And because I am committed, and have been in my life committed to social justice, I think about people who are marginalized, I think about women, about the sort of clients and the communities that we serve. So it means that if we train lawyers to serve people who are marginalized, we have to train lawyers who are ethical, who are skilled, in the same way that we train lawyers to work for corporations, to work for the affluent, etc., etc. So the task of a law school is to ensure that we train skilled and educate skilled people, ethical people, who can do the work that is required of lawyers. Law is a service, and law requires a particular kind of way because the lives of people and the livelihoods of people are very often in your hands. And those of you who are lawyers will know, just read when lawyers are struck, attorneys are struck off the roll and so on. When they're struck off the roll, normally there's some widow who hasn't been paid the 500,000 rand that she was supposed to, and the lawyer has pocketed it. There's been, so it's this is what drives me. It's what is our service, who do we serve, and how do we think about the possibility of law to transform people's lives. And that's what a curriculum should do. And part of that is taking into account our context. Who are our students? What are our institutions, etc.? And so all these questions around decolonization and transformation will deal with those. Okay? Okay, the next round of questions.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. My question overlaps with the first questioner and the second, is that yes, indeed, I think most people here would agree that the South African Constitution is one of the great constitutions, not just of the 20th century, but of any century. But then we keep, and you've used the word, and one of the other gentlemen used the word social justice. And we hear again and again and again people say, our Constitution is not good enough, we demand social justice, and our actions are justified by social justice. And then, touching on the first questioner, when people commit acts that violate laws, not just rules the university sets, we have this practice which is mentioned again and again and again of restorative justice that somehow is supposed to address the act or the resolution of the act in an acceptable way to the perpetrator, to the victim, and to society. And I'd like your comments on that.
Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to make a comment that the South African Human Rights Commission recently released a report called Transformation at Public Universities in South Africa.
Yes.
And I make this comment particularly for the people in the audience that are struggling with this idea of all the ideas of transformation and decolonization. That in this report, and UCT was part of the research sample, they worked with a number of higher education institutions. They found that there are no institutions in our country that actually satisfactorily have transformed, that there is a lot of work to be done, that the process, as much as it's been spoken about, of creating the kind of higher education institutions that we want to have, is very far off the rails from the original plan and the vision of the white paper, which was, I forget what year, but I think it was about early 2000 when it was written. And institutions have simply failed. And if we even slightly want to consider ourselves to be the active citizens that we've heard Professor Andrews speak about, then it means we actually have to actively contribute to that transformation. And if we struggle to do that, if we think, but where is the people and so on, then we need to challenge ourselves to look deeper, because we really have the evidence of black excellence all around us. And I'd like to invite people to pause and think maybe they're not seeing something. It's just not okay for us to continue to hear this question of, when we have more people, then what happens to our excellence? It's simply not true. And you're missing something if you think that stands true. Thank you.
Thank you. So in your speech, the Dean spoke about how student protests is another form of sort of calling for a transformative and decolonized education. So then my question then becomes, is that not a bit, disingenuous from the Dean, sort of building on the argument that was made by the previous speaker, given that one, the law faculty, when we were protesting last year, was one of the faculties that were in support of the militarization of campus. Secondly, the Dean argued that obviously it was important for other students to continue writing exams and their tests because we cannot infringe on the right of others to learn. My question then becomes, who is others? Is that not mostly white students? And that statement then becomes problematic because it implicitly, or rather explicitly, implies that those that are protesting particularly black students, do not want to learn. And when we say that we infringe on the right of others, is academic exclusion and financial exclusion not an infringement on the right of others to learn? So I'd like the Dean to sort of clarify that for me, because I'm not understanding the fact that we have a slide saying that student protests are a way to decolonize education, yet when protests are happening, apparently it's an infringement on the right of others to learn. Thank you.
Okay, so let me just respond to those questions. The first is around restorative justice. I think the idea of restorative justice is now very much part of the way that we think about crimes and harms and so on. So the TRC of South Africa was the gold standard, but before that, countries in Central and South America had been embarking on these processes and so on. And after the TRC, for example, in Canada, there's been a process around the former schools where Indigenous Canadians had been taken and so on. In Australia, with Aboriginal Australians. So the idea is actually to restore the victim and the perpetrator to a place before the harms occurred and so on. So if you look at restorative justice as in sort of in opposition to punitive justice, then I think we can have this, I think it's important, and it's now part of the way we think about harms and we think about crimes. With respect to my role as the Dean, this is what I did last year. I don't know about militarization of the campus and so on. I don't have the authority to call in security and so on. That's done by people above my paycheck. But we did at the beginning of the year issue, as lawyers, we condemned the violence on campus. It's for the public record. As lawyers, we condemn. We live in a society in which protest is allowed. The Constitution allows us to protest, and that was what we stated. This was a statement for which I received a huge amount of criticism and venom from anonymous sources and so on. But as somebody who believes in the rule of law, particularly our Constitution provides us a set of rights, that was what we did. With respect to, as I said, securitization and so on, that was not my call. But at one point, what was going on in the law school, this was going on. Groups of protesters were coming into the law school, setting off the alarm, going into the offices where support staff work, threatening people and so on. And that went on for quite a few days. And then on one occasion, two buckets of sewage was thrown into the foyer of the law school. In that kind of situation, it is my duty. There are people who work in the building and so on. That kind of conduct is unacceptable. So there's not a question for me. When the protests happened, there were many, many students, particularly the final year students and the foreign LLM students, who had jobs lined up and so on and had to finish the year. With the Law Students Council, I worked on a survey of surveying in the students, and we asked 3 questions. How do you think that we should continue the classes? Should students write exams? And then we asked about ideas about how they think we should continue the year and allow students to write the exams. So I made the decision. The majority of students wanted to write the exams, wanted the year to continue, and it was my duty to ensure that the students, particularly in the final year, who had jobs lined up, we could do it. So we went on a project we went to the law firms to ask them and other groups to ask if we can use their lecture rooms. We went online. We got laptops for people. We tried to find out who doesn't have internet access. We created the conditions for the majority of students who wanted to take the exams to take the exams. For the foreign students, there were visa problems. There were all kinds of problems. If you're a student from Uganda, and now it is September, October, you have to go back and then come back and write an exam, all these issues. So my obligation, I felt, we're a small faculty, was to those students who wanted to write the exams and who wanted to finish the year. Those students who didn't want to write the exams could write the deferred exams. And I will stand by that, and if I'm condemned, I feel comfortable about it because I worked with the Law Students Council and I sought input from students, and it wasn't just white students who wanted that, it was also black students. So that's what happened, and that's my record, and I stand by that. And it's not, whether I did the right thing or not, I don't know. We had a mini semester now, and the science students, the engineering students, and so on came back. We, in consultation with a large range of people, including students and the Law Students' Council, we decided that we could finish the year under the conditions that we did. And that's what happened. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take the last round.
It's got to be very, very quick
Yes,
because
can I
I
ask
have somewhere
people
else
not-
to go.
yeah, can I ask people please not to make lengthy inputs, but to just ask a comment, because we said we're going to finish at 7:30, and I want us to sort of respect that.
Hello.
I-
Yes, thank you so much.
I really find it quite ironic, but it also kind of fits very well to what I was going to talk about, how you sort of just ignored the comments that were made by Brian and the critiques around decolonization and the Constitution. If anything, it just represents and reflects the very issues that some of us have with the law faculty. Some of the issues of, quite frankly, the law faculty is very anti-intellectual, and you're very much opposed to critical engagement.
I
But
have spent
on
the
forums
year-
like I'm speaking, in forums like this, you make those comments. If we talk about legal education, you made comments about wanting to sort of like radicalize the legal education, producing graduates for social justice. But let's just go back to the actual curriculum. I was in the law faculty from first year, legal history, up until commercial transactions. You talk about producing graduates who are socially aware, but your very curriculum is rooted in anti-blackness, and it's also very much rooted in capitalism, and it's rooted in very alienating categories. But you sit here and you tell us about how we want to produce graduates. In a law faculty, that's basically owned by 5 law firms. We were there, we saw situations where you have the top firms, your Bowmans, your Weber Wenzels, taking up space. There were professors from your faculty who said to us, you are the customers, and we're providing a service to you, and you're telling us that you want to go to commercial firms. Therefore, that is what we are going to give you. But today, you want to sit here and talk about decolonization. I find that extremely problematic. And you want to talk about, you position yourself as someone who has been extremely helpful to law students. That I find extremely ironic, because I'm sitting here, I've graduated from the law faculty. If I could tell everyone here what it took for me to finish the law faculty, because of your decisions that were clearly prejudicial, after the Vice Chancellor's nominee made a decision against your ruling for a decision that you had taken. I have comrades sitting in this room right now who are facing the same prejudice for one thing, for taking up protest at UCT, for a very good cause. You simply will not speak about that. You wrote a statement in support of the Vice Chancellor's use of private security and militarizing the campus. And here you want to move around your language. You can shake your head, it's fine. It's fine, Dean, it's all right. But the truth will be known that you have literally betrayed all the efforts of people who have worked collectively for people like you to stand where you are today.
Okay,
you wanted
so-
to say something, and then the last one there.
Thank you very much. I don't know if there are others in the same category as myself, but I would like to regard myself as an engaged alumnus. I graduated with a law degree in LLB in 1959. And I taught law after being in practice in Cape Town. I taught law at a university in Britain for 40 years, I don't remember. What I want to say is, in a sense, a footnote to what Professor Andrews has said. The university will never be transformed. You will never wake up in the morning and say, wow, the sun has risen in a transformed university. It's never going to happen. And to the people who want a transformed university, I say, for heaven's sake, come to UCT, study law, and write the bloody textbooks and the law journals and the learned papers and the popular journals, which are going to be studied and taught in the transformed university. That's how the university will be transformed, and it will never finish. It'll go on forever and ever and ever. And your children are going to be complaining, why hasn't the university transformed? Tell them the same thing. Go and study law, and then come out and write the textbooks for the people to study. Thank you.
Sorry, I've been.
I just want to appeal to people to please not to engage on the issues and not to personalize the issues. So
I've
Alex, not too long, eh?
Sorry, I had my hand up for a long time. Sorry.
Just to firstly say that, like, when we engage in these conversations, I find it highly patronizing and paternalistic for alumni in this room to kind of tell us, no, you must come and write the law or whatever. We're actively working within the law faculty and within the university to change the university from inside the university. And we put our degrees and our bodies on the line for that. So secondly, I also want to say that, and to pose a question about how decolonization and the fight that, for example, many of us in the law faculty who started and founded a group called Decolonize UCT Law, that decolonization gets co-opted by management and by the university structures, and it gets washed down and reformed and liberalized. And so my question is, when you say you want to decolonize the curriculum, how do you ensure that all of the academics within the law faculty provide that within every course that we study, not just African customary law and constitutional law? So when is contract going to see reform and decolonization? So that's one thing. And also I noticed in your slide you were speaking about just curriculum change. But I think institutional culture has to be dealt with, especially within the law faculty, when the institutional culture is that of one-upping each other, as black students being the subaltern in the faculty, and hiding textbooks from each other, ensuring that you get a job over other students, and that's just the institutional culture within the law faculty. Is there any move to change that, because it's extremely suffocating?
Thank you. Okay, the last one there, and then, no, sorry, we're going to draw a line under it now. I know that there are many, but unfortunately we have time constraints. So.
Sorry, I just want to make a comment about the whole idea of when we transform UCT, therefore we are compromising on quality. In your speak, I would like to thank you for the presentation. It was good, but where you mentioned that UCT has transformed as far as the student body is concerned, and you also mentioned that UCT is one of the universities in Africa or in the world that is recognized of its research, of its good research. And UCT as an institution is not made out of buildings, but humans. It is us as students who are making up UCT. And if we are going to talk about when we say we should transform UCT and then the issue of quality is raised, then it begs the question, who is UCT? And if UCT as a student body is well transformed, then what kind of product UCT is producing? If when we're talking about transformation in the academia, then quality is then viewed as being compromised. That statement is a bit offensive and it is patronizing. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, so I think this is still, can everybody still hear? So just a couple of things. The first is that I think that this question of excellence and compromising quality, I absolutely agree, as I tried to say in my comments, that excellence and equity go hand in hand, so the one is not exclusive to the other. The second question about engagement, I've been engaging with students for the whole year that I was there and so on. If it's not to your satisfaction, I'm really, really sorry. And if you disagree with the choices I've made, I'm sorry too. But I'm comfortable with the choices I've made. And I'd like to think that I made them with integrity. With respect to what the students have, whether the law faculty and all the academics will be on board, I think that's a very important question. But it's not like I'm the Führer and I can tell all the academics to do what they need to do. They have a union, they have tenure, they have rights. We have strategic plans, we have all kinds of initiatives. But short of me sort of going into every classroom, that's just not possible. I was talking about the structure of the university, and that's one of the things I think that gets in the way of change, because we have so many different people and there's so many different, we think so differently about things. So thank you very, very much for listening to me.
We will organize an event at some point where we can have a more focused engagement on these issues that were raised, because they are very important issues of securitization of the university, questions of protest and limits of protest, and when these things come into conflict with each other, how it relates to the Constitution. We will have an opportunity to do that. It's not as if we don't want to or running away from that discussion. But I'm now going to ask Diana Yach, who is the chair of the Alumni Advisory Board, just to give a short vote of thanks for our speaker.
Dean Andrews, thank you very much for your presentation. I think that it's been illuminating, and I think we've all valued the inputs from the floor, even if it's been difficult. The fact that none of us walked out and we were all willing to engage and exchange views and even disagree, I think is incredibly healthy, and this conversation needs to continue. I really just want to mention, Penny referred to, Dean Andrews referred to the review that was being done, and I think we haven't probably made public some of the findings and some of the consequences of what we found in that self-improvement or self-evaluation report. But a lot of work is going to be undertaken around precisely the issues that many of you have raised, ranging from curriculum review to the structures and to the way of teaching. And I think the whole issue of teaching and learning is a big issue. And the fact that we are carrying on as though we are preparing people for today when actually we need to prepare people for tomorrow and beyond. So I think there's a lot of learning that we've all gone through. I also wanted to say that culture is the heart of this. And we need to learn to live with each other. We need to be able to respectfully engage with each other and be more collegial. And I think that one or two of the students who raised the issue, and I'm not being patronizing, believe me, I've picked up a lot of these issues around institutional culture, and I think all of us know that there are issues that it's not about being overtly sexist or racist, but we know if somebody feels that we're less than. We know if through the tone or the unwritten rules of how people feel they are being treated, we know that something's going on that isn't exactly productive and enabling of the student to reach their full potential. But I am encouraged. I wanted to say, as alumni, and some of you may not be alumni, but those of you who are, we now need to really invest energy and time and commitment at this stage of UCT's development, particularly, and I'm speaking as a law person, to help the transformation process. I think people think transformation is about ticking boxes. It isn't. It's painful. We're talking about the lived experience of our students, who are the lifeblood of our institution. And also, most importantly, dedicated staff who really work their socks off in order to try and create the environment in which people can thrive. But I think there's a lot of learning for all of us to do. So thank you very much for your address, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue.